Well, nowadays you got to have that confidence because people nowadays.
Before we get straight into the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Declan Kirby GAA Star. Declan Kirby GAA Star Championship Journey. It's a series of GAA team children's books written by primary school teacher and GAA coach Michael Egan. You can check it out in the link in the description down below, of course, as well. Follow the trials and tribulations of Declan Kirby and his team at Smithgreen Gaelic Football Club, recently formed but promising GAA team. The book is now available in Easons and all good bookshops, so check it out in the description down below, and let's get straight into it.
I suppose we'll move on to the football anyways, and we'll have a look through obviously some of the games, of course, this weekend in the All Ireland Senior Football Championship. I suppose, like, obviously we didn't really get the same entertainment or the same excitement, I suppose, that we got in hurling, but I suppose like Roscommon Galway was obviously built, I suppose, as probably the competitive game or the game that was going to be of high standard and the game that was going to interest people the most. But I suppose in the end, it didn't really turn out to be a great game in the end. I know Roscommon were quite defensive and look, listen, they have to do what they have to do to try and win the game. And I don't think you can begrudge that too much, but I suppose it definitely wasn't of the highest quality.
No, the weather, of course, didn't help at the start. The minor monsoon that turned up at the start, but I was excited to see like Damien Comer in the championship. I know like it had been whatever, I think RT said it was like 3-4 years or something since he played a championship match for Galway. So I was excited to see him. I'm a big fan of Matthew Tierney. I was so looking forward to seeing him, playing in midfield as well. And I had the boys from Up to Ireland in the podcast before, I had his brother end on before, and the big talk about him, and he's starting to deliver it, which is great for such a young lad as well. Wand of a left foot on him as well, can kick frees off the ground. I was disappointed by the whole lot in general. As you said, Roscommon were so defensive. Like it was, Anthony Cunningham's kind of unusual in that way, because in hurling you wouldn't expect him to do that as a hurling manager, and then in football you kind of say, it's great to be able to turn your tactics from one code to another, but they're very, very negative tactics. Like there's quite good players in that Roscommon team. Like you have two of the Shines, two of the Murtas. Like they're in the underage level, like Roscommon were said to be, the up and coming dominant force, and yet it never translated really to the senior level. So it's kind of annoying. The ultra defensiveness though really kind of annoyed me to the point that like I switched over, I think, at some stage just to watch some of the other matches, because I was just getting frustrated. Galway shooting was kind of wayward as well. Like Peter Cook, was true on goal, and like just decision making wasn't the best. Like he sort of drilled at it when all he do was just place it past the keeper. Like there was a lot of random stuff in it. Rusty from Galway, very rusty from Roscommon, too defensive from Roscommon. Galway will have to do better the next day. Like I know Mayo wiped the floor with Sligo, so they will wipe the floor with Galway as well. Like if that's going to be the case, like they will just steamroll the way through them. Like they're out to Mayo are out to practice their shooting them anyways, to get ready for an All Ireland semi-final and a final. That's what they're looking at, and they can afford to look ahead. Whereas Galway are going to have to do something pretty special, to take them down. I don't see Galway having much of a prayer, sadly, against any of the top teams, not based on their performances of late. Anyway, I know Porrick Joyce is trying to blood a few young lads into it. Finn Connolly and Matthew Tierney and all the lads coming through. It's great to see them, but as far as challenging for an All Ireland, I just don't see it happening, I'm afraid.
Yeah, like I think the potential's there, all right. Like what you mentioned with Matthew Tierney, he was brilliant when he took over a free kick taking duty. Like he was fantastic, and even the Kelly brothers as well, and Peter Cook. Like, so there is the potential there, definitely. I think it's one of them where I feel like with Galway in particular, they need games, like they need matches, and feel like especially with the COVID situation, it disrupted their flow. They couldn't seem to find that same flow. They've had injuries to Shane Walsh and Damien Comer and retirements. Apparently now Roland Steed isn't in the panel either, which is an interesting one. So yeah, like for Galway, I feel like in Division 2 next year would probably benefit them quite a lot. Maybe a bit like Mayo this year and Donegal a few years ago. But like what you said, going up against Mayo next, I know Mayo obviously have Killian O'Connor injured, but Galway will potentially have Shane Walsh injured as well. So it's gonna be very tough for Galway. Like if they do pull it off over Mayo, like fair play to them, but it will definitely take a lot of work, and they'll definitely need to improve quite a lot, because most likely well, we know for certain anyway, Mayo certainly won't be as defensive as what Roscommon were. In fact, they'll probably be the opposite, because that's how they've played in the league so far.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like O'Connor been out and potentially Walsh been out, kind of does take some of the glamour away from the game in some ways on the attacking sides, for the kind of neutral spectator in some ways, or if you're at the game as well. Galway, in saying that, like, they're not short of experience. They have plenty of it. Like, even like Kieran Malloy in defence, like, who would be considered, one of the youngsters, but the man has probably more games under his belt at club and college and county level than a lot of people have, playing 2 and 3 on the same day in some cases a few years ago. So Galway should on paper be well able for them. Like, historically they always have been. But I think no more than the gap between Dublin and the rest of Leinster, like the gap between Mayo and the rest of Connacht is probably as big, but because it's, Leitrim, Sligo, Roscommon, Mayo, and Galway, like, it's not talked about a lot at all. You just assume Mayo are going to get out of Connacht and that's it. Galway get out, it's a big surprise. If Roscommon get out, it's a major shock. Leitrim and Sligo don't even come into the equation really anymore. Not since Emlyn Mulligan and Eamon O'Hara days do they come into the equation anymore. So yeah, like, Mayo on paper should steamroller them realistically, with or without Shane Walsh. Going forward, like, anyone from the half-back line up to the full forward line, like, they're bringing through youngsters as well. Like, and Tommy Conroy's, been a name that'll probably feature for many years to come as well on the Mayo side. So you'd have to fancy Mayo coming through again. I know there's the excitement of the Galway Mayo Connacht final, but it's become, I don't know, maybe for me, it's just become less of a spectacle over the years. I know Galway have had a bit of success here and there, stopping Mayo, kind of in some ways. It is basically stopping them. I just don't see the attraction of it as much anymore. Maybe when the fans come back and you fill out Hyde Park or wherever you want to play it, it might become a big spectacle again, but it's not got the same allure, unless maybe you're from there. It's not got the same allure as it had in the past. So
yeah, definitely a lot for Roscommon to work on, and I suppose for Galway as well. Definitely going into that Mayo game. I suppose we'll run through some of the games in Leinster. I suppose not many people would have expected the Leinster Championship probably to be the most entertaining football championship so far, but that's definitely how it's worked out with the games last weekend and this weekend. And I suppose we'll start with the Westmeath game. It was Laois 110, Westmeath 320. I only caught the first half. I watched a bit of it earlier, and surprisingly enough, Laois were actually leading at half time. So I'd be curious to hear how he's turned it around in the second half. It must have been an emphatic second half performance to rack up 320. Like, what's that, 212 in the second half in total, I think?
Yeah, I think Laois did Laois get 2 points in the second half or something, not very good anyway. It was great for us to be able, and I can't, honestly, when I was watching the game, I was thinking about it. I was like, when was the last time Westmeath got to take off John Heslin and their big names with time left on the clock because they're winning? Like, it was a very surreal kind of feeling. Yesterday watching it at halftime, I was like, oh, here we go, same old, we lose by a point like we did in most of the games in the league. It'll be, poor old Westmeath, so close yet so far again. And then second half was just like, I don't know what Jack Cooney said at halftime or what he fed them, or tactically not a lot changed in many ways. James Dolan still absolutely commanded the defense as like the sweeper, kind of roaming around the back. I thought he was phenomenal. Doesn't get a mention though in any of the reports afterwards, but he did a great job back there. Laois got a red card. I know Kieran Lillis was sent off, but I think that was kind of irrelevant. By then we already had the game wrapped up. Rourke and Dolan was sensational. I don't know where that performance came out of, but it's great to see. I know Jerry Egan was picked, as man of the match, kind of all around for his performance. I still think Ronan O'Toole is one of the most underrated footballers around. The guy does so much for that team that goes often without any recognition, and it's not even like taking 5 or 6 points. It's just the stamina he takes. He'll hold the ball for 2 minutes if he needs to find the right pass, but in between that he's still jinking between 4 or 5 players, and he won't lose possession. Like, he's just very, very good. He doesn't get a lot of recognition for it. He was my man of the match, definitely. Overall, forwards were just class, and I don't know whether it was just, as Mikey Quirk has stepped down today, which is probably the least surprising thing that happened today, given his assessment of it yesterday. It was probably waiting to happen, really. When you label your own team as pathetic after a game, it's probably not something you're going to come back from anyway. So they were they were pathetic. Leash is the only way to describe them defensively. But Westmeath's running game, and I've criticised it hugely since for a long time now, because I just think sitting back on your own 45 just doesn't help a lot of the time. But yesterday we were just very different. We had Ronan Wallace running up from defence. Kev Maguire was coming from fullback. Like, we were 15, 14 attackers basically, and it really worked out for us. And we kind of tried it a bit against Cork down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and it kind of fell apart in the end, and hence why, Cork won by 8 or 9. But as far as performances go, it was brilliant. It's frustrating to be conceding so much early days, and the sitting back, I still think, doesn't help us. It's the reason that we were losing at half time, was just sitting back, and you can't rely on us dominating second halves all the time. I don't think turn into a second half team is the way to go either. I think to kind of do that from the goal would be great, and maybe be more ahead at half time and sort of put the pressure on the other teams. But we took the Kingston brothers pretty much out of the game the second half, which was kind of the main thing. When Ross Munnelly is coming on, no offense to him, but the guy was coaching me and the lads in Maynooth in 2004. He's been around for a long time. When he's your alternative off the bench in his 19th to 20th season, still the only man in Leinster outside of Dublin with a Leinster medal in his pocket that's still playing football, it's probably not a good sign for the structure that you're not getting forwards through. The fact that you're bringing him on, whether he's brought on because the game was over and just to give him a chance to score in 19 seasons in a row, whatever it was, but it didn't look good for Leash at all yesterday. But for us, we'll take anything like that. Another day like that the next day would be absolutely most welcome, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and because I remember watching even the Cork game, and I think you hit like 13, 14 points, I think, before the first water break. Like, and definitely when you do come out and play, like, you definitely have the players to do it. And Ronan O'Toole, like what you said before, like, very skillful footballer. Probably not the finished article yet, but he's certainly very young and certainly has a long way to go yet to get there, and definitely has the potential to do so. And Ray Canellan as well, like, very, very talented footballer in the midfield as well. So, like, do you think you're kind of slipping under the radar a bit? Like, obviously you've Kildare up next, which I personally think is probably the best draw you probably could have got, because I think if you got Meath probably would try and learn their lessons from the league game, and Meath are also coming in on the back of, I mean, we'll speak about that in a moment, but they're coming in on the back of a 22-point win. So going in against Kildare, like, you'll be underdogs, but that could probably suit you, because it is quite an inexperienced Kildare team that haven't been to a Leinster final in a number of years now.
Yeah, we don't suit the favourites tag at all very well. It's never a good thing for us to be favourites going into a match, because it just leaves the door open for a calamity of some sort. So it will suit us going in. Jack Cooney will be more than happy to go in as underdogs and expect nothing out of it. Jimmy Hyland obviously is, the one to watch in the Kildare forwards, but I think Boydu Sayal will be put on him to try and null him a little bit. Like, Boydu is definitely one of the best defenders in the country, but as I said, just doesn't get as much recognition probably as he should, because he's with Westmeath. But round midfield should be interesting. I know Kildare are very, very strong, very, very tall. We have Ray Canellan, we've Sam Duncan, we've Dennis Kroom. We've got lads who are well able to field the ball around midfield. We've tended to kind of go a little bit short of the kickouts and try and work from the back, which I do like. I think I was a bit scared of it at the start, if I'm being honest, because I just thought, oh God, one turn over here and that's it, we're goosed, Whereas now we've kind of got a bit more structured at it. We're obviously, more capable of doing it. So the lads in midfield aren't as vital maybe as they were for the long kickouts. Although, in saying that, like, on the bench, as I've mentioned to others before, like Foley or Inde comes on, and that guy's an absolute animal. The catch he made against Mayo just got no publicity whatsoever. It's one of the greatest catches I've ever seen in my life. But we could take Kildare. Backs against forwards, we have the upper hand in the forwards, I think, definitely. I think we have enough to outscore them and outshoot them. If our own defence, going from Jack Smith up to Jamie Ganood, from 2 up to 7 or whatever, if they can stop Jimmy Hyland and the lads up forwards, I think we can do a job on them. And I hate saying it out loud because it'll probably just fall apart on me, but I think if we got ahead with 20 minutes left, we could do the same thing that we did yesterday and kick on and win by a very comfortable score. Like, you you just need to knock a team down enough just that they kind of, get so frustrated, and then you just start waltzing through them. Like Ronan Wallace was probably one of Westmeath's most forward players yesterday, even though he was playing between the fullback and halfback. At one point he was still going forward in the 70th minute. So I think we could take Kildare. I'll probably say it now, and I'll probably get shot down for it. But I think we could take Kildare. Whether we want to get to an All or to a Leinster final in Croke Park against Dublin to be murdered by 33 points again is up for another day's debate. We could probably take Kildare as being like our Leinster final, basically, in some ways. I think it would be a very successful season overall if we beat Kildare and got to a Leinster final. Regardless the league scores, we're just a little bit of rustiness here and there, and some questionable decisions, I would say, in my eyes. But it's easy for me on the armchair to complain. But I would consider beating Kildare and getting that far as a successful season. I think that's as far as we probably really realistically expect to get this year. So
yeah, like I think it would be a big achievement, all right. Like definitely, and especially considering Kildare gone up to Division 1 and you are going down to Division 3, like it definitely would be a big statement win. And like speaking of Kildare, like like what you said there, kind of late in the second half, the way you pushed on Kildare's weakness seems to be kind of closing out games, and they seem to have a lot of indiscipline as well. Like against Meath, they finished with 14 men. In this game, they finished with 13 men. And there was definitely an opportunity there for Offaly to kick on. They just didn't seem to have it within them. I think maybe they were just a little bit tired from all the games in the past couple of weeks. They played 4 or 5 games on the bounce there, obviously including that Derry game. So I suppose for Kildare, like there's definitely a lot for them to work on going into that game, because there were opportunities where Offaly could have kicked on and potentially nicked it.
Yeah, I think Offaly maybe were kind of lacking around the middle a little bit. Nothing against, the lads around midfield. I know Anton, and I know Anton Sullivan fairly well, and probably big disappointment, his own performance yesterday wasn't probably what he was looking for. The same with quite a lot of them, even, in the backs and the forwards, like Rigney, Bernard Allen, when he came on, there was a lot of ineffectiveness in the whole team. Masterson and Feely kind of dominated around the middle for Kildare when they needed to. They didn't do it for the whole game, but when they needed to stand up, they kind of did. And obviously just weren't, whether it's a combination of tiredness and everything else, or whether they just, came up against a team who were that bit stronger. They were, I won't say found out, but John Mahon will be disappointed with that to end the season in that way, given all that they had done and given the big hype around them, and Shane Lowry coming in and helping with the sponsorship. Like they were kind of almost heading towards the fairy tale story of the year, and then yesterday kind of just sort of blew up in their face in some way. They'll still take it as a very positive year, but yeah, I don't think too many of them would have been happy with their performances yesterday. Like right from Paddy Dunnican and goals right up the forward line. Like and McNamee was kind of nearly their most what would you say, enthusiastic forward yesterday, and like he's pushing on whatever 35, 36. I think they'd be disappointed. For Kildare going forward, I could have done with a few more injuries and stuff yesterday. A few more, lads falling down would have been great for us, but for Westmeath. But Kildare and Westmeath the rivalry goes back a long way. Like it goes back decades, and generally it's been a Kildare win, and Westmeath just sort of drowned their sorrows at the end. But now I would put us slightly ahead of them, even though I know Kildare will go in as favourites because of the history and blah blah blah, all that. I still think we have enough to beat them, and I really hate. I hate putting my neck on the line anytime Westmeath are playing and say, yeah, we'll definitely win, because it's usually we end up getting murdered then. But yeah, I think we'll do it the next day. I think if we can replicate half of what we did yesterday, the second half, or even the last 20 minutes, if we did that somewhere along the line for a 20-minute period in the second half, the next day, it would be enough, I think, to beat most teams at our level on the day.
Yeah, like I think you've got a great chance as well. Like I'd have a sneaky feeling that you might be able to turn them over as well. Like, and yeah, like what we said with Offaly, I thought Cian Farrell was brilliant in the Offaly game. To be fair to him, he had a good game. But like what you said, yeah, there's probably too many players maybe that probably feel that they didn't play to their absolute best on the day. I suppose one team that did maximise their potential was Wexford. They got beat by Dublin by 8 points. I mean, maybe not necessarily maximising their potential, but in terms of, like, it was definitely a lot more competitive than people expected. I think, like, Dublin were favourites to win this by 25 plus, and it actually turned out to be, like, this was the second this was the second time since 2013 that a team came within 10 points of Dublin in the Leinster Championship. I don't think, and like Wexford are a Division 4 team, you know, like don't think anyone expected to see this to happen.
No, it was I know there was some stat as well, like that Stephen Cluxton had played 102 of his 111 games or something in Croke Park. So maybe there's all this talk of, you know, take Dublin out of Croke Park, blah, blah, blah. Like maybe there was a little bit of that in it, like that they went down to the famous, you know, sunny southeast, and suddenly the wind started to pick up and they had the wind for the first half. And it's kind of nearly obscured their shooting in some ways because they couldn't get to grasp with the wind when they had it. And then they still couldn't get fully to grasp with it when they were against it. So they did the job they needed to do. They got a chance to play a few new lads. Got the guy around midfield, Kufik Byrne, was it who was around midfield? Like they got to bring in a few new lads, and it kind of in some ways for Dessie Farrell was the perfect game. They didn't murder anyone. They got a bit of a challenge. Like the Wexford lads really put it up to them physically. They put it up to them. Like there was no fear. Like you could see them. You know, they were baiting each other over the sideline at times, which was no harm for the game either as well. So, but Dublin in the end, realistically, cruised through that. It might look like a very facile 8-point victory for Dublin, but to them, that's fine. That's grand. You know, let's go to the next day. You looked at the camera at one stage, went to the bench, and like you just saw Dean Rock sitting in the front seat, like, you know, outstretched, and you're kind of like there's no team in the country really, you know, can call on that caliber of player off the bench, you know, with that many All Ireland medals and still be that young that could come on and turn a game on its head. So I think Dessie Farrell and them, all the backer team, they'll just look at it as job done. No newspaper headlines the next day have been murdered. All the headlines are about, you know, whether Stephen has left the panel permanently or not. They'll take that in some ways because it keeps the focus on Dublin, but it deflects away from the football on the pitch. So I think they'd be happy enough just to come out of Wexford with a win and a bit of a tussle, a bit of a fight, a bit of a scrap. It's no harm for it. It's no harm for them either, because at this stage they're so used to teams having been blitzed in the first 20 minutes, or, you know, in Mayo, like 12 seconds in the All Ireland final, you know, that kind of thing. So I think you'd be happy enough with that. And fairness to Wexford, like, you know, all they'll get today is like, you know, a fair play, pat on the back, well done. But they will be happy with that, because the other side who was, you know, fair play, pat on the back, you've been beaten by 50, 60 points. So I think that's the better of the two options that was going to come out for Wexford yesterday. It was either going to be looking at a murdering or looking at a, you know, fair play to you for giving it a go, and they really did. So Dublin will be happy out. Like, it's second gear football, and you can still win. Like, whereas, you know, Westmeath were in fourth, fifth gear, bursting their backs to get past Laois in the first half yesterday. So yeah, Dublin will be fine. They'll still be there. They won't get knocked out just yet.
Yeah, like it was a strange game, like, because I've seen a lot of people kind of saying online that Dublin were dreadful and they were poor. And I thought in the first half, to be fair, Dessie Farrell said we were shocking actually in his interview. He was definitely he wasn't happy at all. I wouldn't go as far as that in the first half. I think we were definitely poor in the first half. But in the second half, I thought Dublin done what they needed to do. They were always in control of the game, and I think it was a case of not knocking it up another gear, keeping it very steady. You know, not. Like, obviously, as we've seen with a lot of players across the country, a lot of players getting injured. Conor McManus will get onto in a moment as well. Shane Walsh, Michael Murphy, Killian O'Connor. I mean, the list goes on in terms of injuries. And I think the last thing that Dessie or Dublin would want is, you know, the likes of your Cormac Costellos and whatnot. And I think that's probably why he's not playing Dean Rock that much as well, because he probably wants to keep him as fit as possible. And I suppose, like what you said there about Stephen Cluxton, I mean, that situation is certainly an interesting one as well, because he was being reported as returning to training by a number of news outlets during the week. And there was, I think, Liam Brady and off the ball there a couple of weeks ago was fairly decisive in saying he retired. So I don't know, like, I feel like someone's not speaking out somewhere. Like, there's something happening here behind the scenes and we're just not getting the full information.
Yeah, in some ways, for me, I suppose, I think it's, if he is gone, it's the way he wants to do it. Yeah. No interview, no press, no nothing. Talk about me all you want. I couldn't care less. It's very much in his demeanor, like, you know, as this way of his style, kind of, that he's done it over the years. You know, very, you know, walking off the pitch after All Ireland finals, you know, to come back out again, celebrate after, kind of very low key, I suppose, the way to describe him in life. If it is the way he's gone, I think it's Stephen Cluxton 101 of how to retire. Basically, that's pretty much, he's done it his way. And if it is, I think it could be. I think it could be the end of it, because like I know seven few of the lads have chatted with us before. Like we did say, years ago, will he come back next year? And we always said, if he doesn't, well, he was not going to tell you he's not coming back. There's not going to be a big, massive press release. And if it is, it'll only be, to say thanks to the fans and thanks to everyone. There won't be like, I want a testimonial, I want a dinner, I want all this kind of thing. Like it'll just be, I'm gone, let me be, let me go back teaching in Glasnevin, in September, that kind of thing, and that'll be it. So, huge loss to the game if it is. Like I still think after 2004, like the greatest GAA moment I've ever had live was sitting in the front row, Croke Park, behind him in 2011. I was sitting right behind him for that free against Kerry. I'll never forget it as long as I live. That was still one of the greatest moments I've ever had. Surrounded by Dublin fans, and one of my mates is a massive Dublin fan as well, and just willing them to win, like willing them to score, because Dublin had won nothing at that stage. Whereas now I'm like, just I don't want you to win anymore. I've had enough of you, kind of. But yeah, no, still I'll always remember for that moment anyway, one of the great moments in my life. So.
Yeah, 100%. I was at that final as well. Actually, it was the only All Ireland final I've ever been to. Actually, and it was yeah, like I couldn't describe the emotions that what was like on Hill 16. I think probably the only thing that beats it was Kevin McManaman's goal about 10 minutes earlier. But yeah, like, and I think as well, because I remember when the ball went over the bar, and then I remember the whistle blew about 10 seconds later. It was literally like, the definition of scoring a last minute point or a last minute goal. Like it was extraordinary stuff. Like, and like, do you think Dublin could even struggle maybe even without him? Like, because I think we don't know too much about Evan Comerford really. Like I've seen him play a couple of times with Ballymun, and he's a brilliant shot stopper, to be fair to him. Not fully convinced with his kickouts just yet in terms of I mean, look, listen, you're trying to replace probably the best of all time, and we've seen with goalkeepers down the years, it's very hard to find a good one. So do you think Dublin could maybe struggle a bit without him?
Probably maybe in like the leadership terms, that kind of thing, ruling the backs and letting them know, like as quiet as he is, a man off the pitch, at the best of times, he's very, very commanding on the pitch, and without needing to tell everyone he's commanding. Like you often see, if you're in Croke Park as well, especially, like I've been fortunate to go to, a lot of Dublin games in the last 15 years or so. And because I was a keeper myself, a very unsuccessful keeper, but I was a keeper myself, back in the day. And you love watching the keepers and how they do things. And after he'd, kick the ball out, he'd still be pointing, like, cornerbacks, pull back, push forward. Like he's very commanding. Evan Comerford is a lovely guy. He came into our school actually randomly, just before COVID, and talked to the kids and everything. Lovely guy. A lot of time for him, absolute gentleman. But at the same time, probably, as you said, definitely doesn't have that commanding thing that Cluxton has. But probably will pick it up over time as well. Like, to me anyway, it seemed like, if you can come in front of a school of 200 kids and, act like you've been there all your life, there's no reason when you go on the pitch that you can't, tell a few lads to shuffle around, and, you've got the vision to see it when you're standing in goals. So I think he could become a household name very quickly. But he will have to gain that influence, the skills of influence and all that. That will come with winning All Irelands, and hopefully, for his sake, hopefully he gets to do it over the next number of years. It's just a case of whether he learn more from winning, or maybe somewhere along the line he might learn more in defeat, and that might make him a better player as well. So yeah, but certainly two left footers, Dublin keepers for the next, last 20 years, and the next 20 years could be both left footers, and I'm sure one can learn from the other. I'm sure Stephen Cluxton won't disappear forever. I'm sure there'll be some turning up a training to help with a few kickouts here and there, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine so. Like he'll definitely get involved in what way he can. I don't know if I'd ever see him really go into a coaching role. I don't know if he's that type really. Like we said, he's very quiet, he's very private. I don't know if he'd really go into that. But certainly it will be interesting to keep an eye on Evan Comerford anyway, in particular, like over the next while. And one thing we've seen with Dublin down the years as well is, like, even when Jack McCaffrey opted out, there was a big kind of deal about that, like who are Dublin going to play, of course, at a wing back, and then in the end, in comes Robbie McDade and does a phenomenal job for Dublin. Just kind of slips under the radar, comes out of nowhere. So, like with Dublin in particular, they even when players do retire, they always just seem to have that option there. Like they just always have it there.
Yeah, it's just the conveyor belt of talent, isn't it what they call it? So like on our team, like if John Heston gets injured, like or retires, we're like, oh dear God, like who do we have to replace him? Whereas Dublin just have that kind of, what would you call it, basket of talent in some ways that they can call upon. So yeah, Jack McCaffrey was another one. Yeah, I remember when he said that he was stepping away, everyone was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then most people who kind of suppose knew the Dublin team were like, look, there's any amount of lads who can step in here. So they mightn't be as quick as him, they mightn't be skillful as him, but they learn the same way that he did. Like the year he broke onto the Dublin panel again, he came into our school to present awards at the end of the year, and he won the All Star, pretty soon after. Like it doesn't take long when you're on a successful team and a strong team and a well-run team to find your feet. Like even was it Padre Coffee Burn yesterday, whoever it was, around the middle, like the guy is new enough in terms of championship and league football. He After 20 minutes he looked like he's been playing there all his life. So I think you just need a good setup, and Dublin is literally the ultimate setup. I think whoever steps in, Comerford, and maybe might get a bit of a challenge possibly from a backup keeper or two. I know I can't remember the name. Was it Leonard
Michael Shields.
Shields? Who was the
Yeah,
guy?
Michael
Was he
Shields, I
backing
think.
up Cluxton? Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're kind of like Steve Harper behind Shea Given at Newcastle for all those years. You're just sitting there wondering, am I ever going to get a go? And then Cluxton retires, and suddenly, you still don't get a go. So
Yeah.
yeah, it could be a case of that. Hopefully, there'll be a bit of competition for the goals with Comerford as well. It always makes for an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely will be one worth keeping an eye on. I suppose touching on the Meath and Longford game, like Meath won that game 422 to 12 points. I know you've a cousin involved in the Longford panel, so I suppose not the best day at the office from Longford anyways. I mean, I think a lot of people had this as a real banana skin type game, and to be fair to Meath, they dealt with it really well. Like it was close enough actually going into the final few minutes of half time. I think before injury time there was only 1 or 2 points in it, and then Jordan Morris got a goal and me just pulled away. But I suppose not the best day from a Longford point of view.
No, Sucker Punch of conceding a goal so early on wasn't great for them. And I know I said to my cousin even last night, I was like, I think I flicked off the game for a couple of minutes when it was kind of relatively close, and I think I flicked back and Meath were out the door. Game was over, and I was like, what the hell did I miss? And then saw the highlights and was like, all right, it was just a case of Jordan Morris goal, and it was like just chipping away constantly, adding on score after score. Next thing, without even kind of counting, they were 10 12 ahead, then it was 15, then it was 20, and you're like, oh, good luck. Or Davis stepping down, I suppose, probably not too unsurprising given a defeat like that, and given sort of coming to the end of his tenure as well. Disappointed for my cousin. I see the effort that they put in Longford, and having Paddy Collum and Danny Mimna, my cousin, on the podcast as well. Like, they talk so highly about the effort that goes in, and you can see it, and I've been to a lot of club matches down in Longford as well because of, my cousin and a few of the lads down there. And the standard is pretty strong, like for a county that gets no real recognition whatsoever apart from Mullinachta, winning Leinster. But they probably should be as a team maybe slightly further on than they are. Maybe some of that comes down to selection. Like I know very biased of me to say that my cousin should be selected on the team, but haven't seen him. Like, I'm not just saying that on a family thing. Like, haven't seen him play against some of the lads who are starting on the team. He should be starting, and there's other guys on the bench who also should be starting as well, who I don't know. I just know their names. I've just seen them play. So selection wise, I was very kind of questioning some of the choices that they made, and they have their stalwarts, Paddy in goals, Mickey Quinn, obviously, bringing his experience from Australia, from many years ago, still a great footballer, but I think they need to bring through a couple of other players, and some of those guys who were sitting on the bench for the last few days need to help out. Like Rian Brady has to do an awful lot in his own up front. Probably too much, I suppose, has been asked of him in some ways, and I think that needs to be addressed with whoever comes in next time round. So yeah, bad day at the office for them. Good day for me. They'll be happy enough. Don't think Andy McEntee will have learned a massive amount out of that game in any form, other than maybe the first 20, 25 minutes when the game was kind of close, and even after the goal they scored, Longford still chipped away at them. So we will have learned a bit from that. But as the second half goes, that game was over by the time I turned back on, and there was still plenty of time left, unfortunately. So
Yeah, like I was impressed with Meath. Like they moved the ball very,
Mm.
very quickly, to be fair to them, and they certainly dealt with, because obviously Longford were sitting very deep, and Meath probably, you know, their main threat is goals, and they were kind of trying to force me to kick from distance. And to be fair to me, they were very patient and waited for the right openings to come. Would you give them much chance against the Dubs? I know we all kind of know realistically that Dublin will very much end up winning that game, but how would you kind of see the game going? Like, do you think it could be as big of a distance as what it was last year? Do you think maybe this is Meath's chance to claw the deficit back a bit, and maybe within 10 points? Because I suppose if Wexford can do it, maybe Meath have a chance as well.
Yeah, it's kind of got to stage, hasn't it, I suppose, where we're kind of talking about, you know, can they just not do as bad as they did last year? Really, it's
Yeah, it's a
probably
bit sorry, isn't it?
It's an indictment of where football is, I suppose, these days. But yeah, no, like I don't like nothing against the Meath lads. Like there's some sound lads in that team who I would know one or two of, and lads who are gone off the panel as well, like Sean Tobin and stuff, who I would know pretty well. And I think even the most diehard Meath fan would still say that anything under a double-digit defeat is probably a happy result. Probably frustrating, like for Andy McEntee to get them in the draw. Probably didn't really want it. Would rather have had them. You know, well, I say the chance of silverware. I don't think it makes much odds, to be honest. Really, does it? Like whether it's a semi-final or a final, it's we basically are talking about going on to Paddy Power and seeing how much Dublin are expected to win by. That's basically it. And I don't think that'll be any different. Even if they played it in Meath, if they played it out in the Aran Islands, it wouldn't make any odds. It would still be how much are Dublin going to win by, and whether Desi starts Paddy Coffey Byrne in midfield, or whether he brings back in Dean to start, or whether it doesn't really matter. I think that just it's a juggernaut. It's basically the football in my eyes is it's great to get a few good games outside it, but really we're waiting for, you know, Mayo, Kerry, Dublin, one of the northern teams, whoever comes out of it, to play in the last four, and that's what we're waiting for. It's kind of annoying. I know it's sad that it's got that way, but I know you've been a Dublin all that, but it is basically until someone actually beats Dublin, the football is kind of dead in many ways. It's basically waiting for a last four. Might as well just play the last four, as I said, you know, play the league and the provincials and all that beforehand, and then just have a big, you know, maybe play it over 7 legs or something like they do in the NBA and make it interesting. I don't know, do something. I'd love the Champions League format just for a year. I thought it was the perfect year to do it, but sure, look, too many old lads in charge at the top, unfortunately. So
Yeah, like I think definitely the championship structure debate is definitely something worth football. Like definitely has a lot of substance to, anyways, because I think you see in hurling how competitive it is, and I think football probably needs to be running in a similar way. Like and two games we'll touch on in Ulster now, like probably very one sided as well. Like Monaghan 121, Fermanagh 14, Armagh 415, Antrim 14 points. Like to be fair to both Antrim and Fermanagh, they were competitive and they did put it up to both Armagh and Monaghan respectively. But I suppose again, it's that kind of it's a lot of these games are going very much as expected, and even at times as well. You've seen with Meath, Longford, and even Waterford, Waterford, Limerick. Yeah, where Limerick won by 18 points. Like we're seeing the gap is I suppose is there really for us all to see in these games.
Yeah, it's sort of strange, I suppose, to always to talk of, you know, the northern football is always the best, whereas this year it's really not that interesting. Whether it's just the way the draw fell or what it is. Like I know I text Patrick Quayle used to be in goals for many years ago. He's over in Vancouver now, and I texted him before the game and he said, "Oh, it's going to be 33 years of disappointment as a Fermanagh fan." So, which it was. Like it's just, yeah, I don't know. They're still Fermanagh so over-reliant on Sean Quigley still. Like since the day he got the standing ovation in Croke Park for, like, you know, giving the Dubs a bit of a rattle, like he's still their number one player realistically. I think Monaghan had, I was looking on the score, BOAP, I've forgotten. I think it's 9-10 different scorers maybe at the start, and 15 got on for Monaghan. Like it's pretty high, and it's bad for Fermanagh. Like it doesn't make for a nice view. And you know, Ricey McManus is obviously not. He's probably getting the same. Managers are getting the same out of the Fermanagh team as they have for the last number of years. Monaghan strolling through. It's kind of same old story in some ways. Strolling through without doing a huge amount. Armagh, the positive from the Armagh Antrim game for me BBC punditry and stuff is class. That was basically the highlight out of it. I love Oisin McConville and them been on. I thought the commentary was great. Thomas Diblock was in the commentary. Like that was basically the highlight of it. Armagh are maybe coming in under the radar a little bit. They mightn't be the worst thing for them. Like they've some strong players like Stephen Campbell and Jamar Hall are two sort of names that everyone kind of knows nowadays. And defensively they look pretty good. Tantrum obviously not really at the races overall. The Ulster football is not exactly the force to be reckoned with, maybe, which is not great for the game either, because we do rely on top northern teams to come out to tackle Kerry, Dublin, and Mayo, and whoever else. So yeah, it's a pity it's gone that way.
Yeah, like I'm hoping from here on out anyway that Ulster definitely is competitive, obviously with Derry, Donegal and Tyrone Cavan next weekend, and then the semi-finals. Like I suppose in the Monaghan game you had the McManus injury towards the end of the game as well. I'm not too sure what the situation is. I didn't see it personally, so I don't know how long he'll be out for, but certainly like that's a huge loss for Monaghan, because you see even the way they play at times as well, like even in the Galway game, when they avoided relegation, like they were in that last minute, they were waiting, they kept passing it from side to side, waiting to get him on the ball, because he's the one player that from 40, 50 meters, 30 meters, like he's the player that can change a game. And without him, I suppose it'd be tough for Monaghan now to come through Ulster.
Yeah, if he's out longer or long enough term, you'd have to think that mightn't necessarily be the end for them, but they are very much a team. I know they've got their lads at the back and they've got a couple of good midfielders, but are you then relying on like Ryan McInnesby and a few others then to pick up, from where he's missing? I don't really see that happening. Like they are very much if you went around the country and asked anyone who follows GAA name Monaghan's, one starlet, they're going to name Conor McManus. So as you said, he'll kick a score from 40 or 50. He'll kick some outrageous score from like the sideline, and that'll G everybody up, and the crowd will get going, and the players will lift from it. And without that, then you're kind of decimated in some ways. I know it's like taking one jersey out of a team, but you're basically taking whatever huge percentage of scorers out of the team as well. So yeah, I don't really know what they're going to do without it, to be honest. So yeah, I'm actually just checking her. Sorry, my battery is about to die. I've just noticed.
No worries. Well, I suppose we're
I don't know charger. I don't know where my charger's gone either. So
no, you're grand. Though sure, we're about to wrap up there. Anyways,
yeah.
I suppose before we do wrap up, anyway, I was going to ask you obviously about Loaf of Bread season 2,
Yeah.
Loaf 2, obviously going global. I suppose I'll give you the floor. You can speak about it.
Yeah, it's something I kind of built, I suppose, last 10, 15 years of traveling to 100 or so odd countries, like on holidays and different things, and seeing cultures and people and great, sport and stuff abroad as well. That the GAA clubs abroad, there are so many of them that a lot of them don't get a lot of recognition. You get the Middle East games, which people kind of know a lot about. We've had the RT pundits and all stars and stuff out there. There's some clubs well known, but then my aim was to try and give some publicity to the clubs around the world, maybe who nobody knows about, along with the ones that people do know about. So it's twice a week, every Monday and every Thursday morning, 9 a.m. There'll be a different club on, and it'll be short bit of history on the club and on the city or the country they're from. Plenty of crack and stories in the chat with the people who come on from each club, and then a bit of a preview to the one the next day that's on as well. So it started out as a message to a few clubs, kind of one in each continent. There's now 67 clubs involved, and today then O'Neill's have kind of come on board as well, offering to do a giveaway of the jerseys from one of the international teams as well, just to promote it and promote the jerseys for the clubs, because obviously it makes them a bit of money as well. But you get some amazing things like Hyundai Gales, the smallest club in the world in China. You get Bermuda GAA, who I went out to see years ago. My sister-in-law was part of their founding, on an island that's 40 kilometers, big. Argentina GAA, where you meet a guy called Stevie Thomas Carteledge in the middle of Buenos Aires, who comes on and tells you that he's related to Morris, Conn and Cian O'Callaghan. Like these are the things that you find that you would never find, and a lot of people don't even know these places exist, these clubs exist. So yeah, definitely worth tuning in. Anyone who's into the GAA at all, it's never been done before in the history of the GAA. So it's a new one, and I'm just trying my best to build the audience for the clubs more than anything else, because it's those people who listen who will buy the jersey and support the clubs, and we'll give them a bit of a platform to be heard. So that's kind of where it all came from. But yeah, definitely, if anyone listening wants to check it out, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. Like definitely, like, because like what I was saying earlier as well, with a lot of different clubs, like they kind of make their own way of making it work. Like I was on the J1 in San Diego there a few years ago. I didn't play for the club over there, but I know a few lads that I was living with were playing a bit of hurling and a bit of football, and some of the stories they were coming back with as well about like different people trying to make it work. And like, so like sometimes over here, like if you have a pitch and you try make it work with cones or whatever, like sometimes like these clubs can be very creative with different ways that they make it work. Like they might not have a pitch, so maybe they'll find the beach somewhere, or they'll find different ways to make it work, which is certainly quite fascinating.
Yeah, you'll if you listen to any of the episodes, number 1 today is with Geelong Gaels out in Australia. It's actually a Raheny man, Johnny from Raheny is out in Geelong Gaels, and he was talking all about it. But yeah, over the next 8-9 months, twice a week, some of the stories that come out are brilliant. And then I've got some crack questions to ask them as well, like about Father Ted and choosing between Marty and Des and all that kind of thing, the usual stuff to get the chats going and have a bit of crack as well. So, but yeah, we've every continent covered, every GA association in the world covered, right up to Luleå Gaels, who are up in the North Pole of Sweden, right down as far as Maris Rangers in Auckland, South Africa Gaels, Argentina, as far west in the world as Mulholland in Los Angeles, right across to Japan GA, lads in China, a couple of teams in China, Vietnam, Bermuda, Myanmar, everywhere. Basically, you name it, I've found a club. So it's going well.
100%. Yeah. Well, I'll link down the first episode down below anyway for anyone to check it out. And yeah, look, listen, cheers anyway, Jason, for your time, for running through all the action in about football and hurling.
Yeah, pleasure, and thanks so much for having me on. I'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.